When 12-year-old Sophia accidentally answered a phone call meant for a billionaire CEO, she had no idea she was about to save him from losing everything to a $1 million scam. What happened next changed both their lives forever. Marcus Sterling adjusted his platinum watch as he surveyed his empire from the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling Industries' top floor. At 52, he had built a technology conglomerate worth billions, transforming from a small-town dreamer into one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. His corner office, spanning nearly half the building's top floor, was a testament to his success. Marble surfaces, priceless artwork, and a view that reminded him daily of how far above everyone else he had climbed. But success had come with a price. Marcus had grown cold, calculating, treating employees like numbers on a spreadsheet rather than human beings. He believed his wealth made him superior, and he had no patience for what he considered the common people who worked beneath him. "Mr. Sterling," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, "the cleaning crew has arrived for their weekly deep clean." Marcus barely acknowledged the announcement. To him, the cleaning staff were invisible, necessary but insignificant, like the furniture or the air conditioning. He had never bothered to learn their names or acknowledge their existence beyond ensuring they stayed out of his way during business hours. Elena Rodriguez had been leading the cleaning crew at Sterling Industries for nearly 8 years. At 45, she possessed a quiet dignity that her circumstances couldn't diminish. She worked multiple jobs to provide for her 3 children, sacrificing her own dreams to ensure they had opportunities she never had. Despite facing daily indifference and occasional rudeness from the executives, Elena maintained her professionalism and took pride in her work. Today was different, though. Elena's usual childcare had fallen through, and she had no choice but to bring her youngest daughter to work. Sophia Rodriguez, at 12 years old, was mature beyond her years, shaped by watching her mother's strength in the face of adversity. She carried a worn backpack filled with homework and library books, planning to study quietly while her mother worked. "Stay close and don't touch anything," Elena whispered to Sophia as they entered the executive floor. "These people don't like to be reminded that we exist." Sophia nodded, her sharp eyes taking in the opulent surroundings. She had always been observant, a trait that served her well in school, where she consistently earned top grades despite attending an underfunded public school. While other children her age played video games, Sophia spent her free time reading everything she could get her hands on, dreaming of a future beyond her current circumstances. As Eleanor began her meticulous cleaning routine, Sophia settled into a corner with her homework. The executive floor was eerily quiet, with most employees having left for the day. The only sounds were the gentle hum of computers left on standby and the soft whistle of the air conditioning system. Marcus was in his private conference room, reviewing quarterly reports, when his secretary left for the evening. He had specifically requested not to be disturbed, as he was expecting an important call from his legal team about a potential merger that could add hundreds of millions to his company's value. The call was scheduled to come through his direct line, a number known only to his most trusted advisors and highest-level business partners. When the phone rang exactly on time, Marcus was in the bathroom attached to his office, leaving the shrill sound echoing through the empty executive suite. Sophia looked up from her mathematics homework as the persistent ringing filled the air. She glanced around, noticing that the sound was coming from the large corner office, where a phone sat on an imposing desk. The ringing continued, urgent and demanding attention. Elena was in the supply closet, gathering fresh cleaning materials, when Sophia made a decision that would change everything. The phone had been ringing for nearly a minute, and something in its persistence suggested importance. Without fully understanding why, Sophia walked into the office and picked up the receiver. "Sterling Industries, good evening," she said in her clearest voice, mimicking the professional tone she had heard receptionists use. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, and carried an air of authority that even a 12-year-old could recognize. "Finally, Marcus, we need to move quickly on this. The merger documents require your immediate signature, and we have a narrow window to close this deal." Sophia felt her heart race. This was clearly an important business call, and she was just a child who shouldn't be answering phones in a CEO's office. But something in the caller's tone struck her as odd. There was an underlying urgency that seemed forced, almost theatrical. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Sterling is not available right now," Sophia replied carefully. "May I take a message?" There was a brief pause before the voice responded, irritation creeping into its professional veneer. "This is James Crawford from Crawford & Associates legal firm. We've been handling Marcus's most sensitive business dealings for years. This merger cannot wait. We're talking about a deal worth $800 million, and the opportunity expires tonight." Sophia's mind raced. She had overheard enough adult conversations to know that important business deals didn't typically operate under such extreme time pressure. Her natural curiosity, combined with an intuitive sense that something wasn't right, prompted her to ask questions that any adult might have dismissed in the face of such apparent authority. "Could you please spell your firm's name for our records?" Sophia asked, grabbing a pen and paper from the desk. "What? Why would you need—" "Look, just get Marcus on the phone immediately. Every minute we waste costs him millions." Crawford's voice grew sharper, the professional mask slipping slightly. Sophia's keen observation skills, honed by years of watching and listening in a world where children were expected to be invisible, picked up on the subtle inconsistencies in the caller's story. The pressure tactics, the insistence on immediate action without proper verification, and the caller's growing agitation when faced with simple questions all raised red flags in her young but sharp mind. "Sir, I understand this is important, but Mr. Sterling has always insisted that all business communications go through proper verification procedures," Sophia said, drawing on her limited knowledge of business practices gleaned from television and her mother's stories about corporate protocols. What Crawford didn't know was that he was speaking to someone with nothing to lose and everything to gain from asking the right questions. Sophia wasn't intimidated by his authority because she had never been taught to be impressed by titles or aggressive business tactics. She was simply an intelligent child trying to do the right thing. "Listen here." Crawford's voice lost all pretense of professionalism. "I don't know who you are, but you're about to cost your boss the deal of a lifetime. Get Marcus Sterling on this phone immediately, or I guarantee you'll be looking for a new job tomorrow." But Sofia Rodriguez wasn't an employee who could be threatened. She was just a 12-year-old girl with sharp instincts, and Crawford's threat only confirmed her growing suspicion that something was terribly wrong with this supposedly urgent business call. The tension in Marcus Sterling's office grew thicker as Sophia held the phone, her young mind processing the increasingly aggressive tone from the man claiming to be a lawyer. She had learned from her mother that when adults became angry quickly, it usually meant they were trying to hide something or force someone into making a bad decision. "Sir, I think there might be some confusion," Sophia said calmly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Could you provide me with your bar association number so I can verify your credentials? Mr. Sterling always requires proper documentation for such significant transactions." Crawford's laugh was sharp and condescending. "Bar association number? Listen, little girl, I don't have time for games. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I've been practicing corporate law longer than you've been alive. This merger involves Pinnacle Tech Corporation, and if we don't move tonight, Sterling Industries will lose the biggest opportunity in its history." Sophia's mind immediately caught something crucial. She had been helping her mother clean this office for months, and she had seen the company documents, letterheads, and business correspondence scattered across Marcus's desk. She knew the names of Sterling Industries' major competitors and potential partners, and Pinnacle Tech Corporation was definitely not among them. Pinnacle Tech Corporation? Sophia repeated, buying herself time to think. Could you remind me of their primary business sector? Mr. Sterling likes to review all partner companies' portfolios before any meetings. There was a telling pause on the other end of the line. Crawford was clearly scrambling, not expecting to be questioned by what he assumed was just a secretary. They're in advanced semiconductor manufacturing, obviously. Now stop wasting time and get Marcus on this phone. Sophia's eyes widened. She might have been just 12 years old, but she was an exceptional student who read voraciously, including business magazines she found in the company break room. She knew that Sterling Industries specialized in software development and digital solutions. They had nothing to do with semiconductor manufacturing. More importantly, she had overheard Marcus talking to his real lawyers just last week about how his company deliberately avoided hardware manufacturing because it required completely different expertise and infrastructure. Mr. Crawford, Sophia said, her voice taking on a subtle authority that surprised even herself. I'm going to need to put you on hold while I locate Mr. Sterling. Could you please provide a callback number in case we get disconnected? No, don't put me on hold. Crawford's professional facade cracked completely. This needs to happen right now. The documents are ready, and all Marcus needs to do is provide his electronic signature authorization. We can handle everything remotely. No meetings, no delays, no complications. Every word Crawford spoke made Sophia more suspicious. Her mother had taught her that honest people didn't mind waiting, didn't mind being verified, and didn't try to rush important decisions. Crawford was exhibiting all the classic signs of someone trying to manipulate a situation. Meanwhile, Marcus had finished in his private bathroom and was walking back toward his desk when he heard voices coming from his office. He paused, confused, recognizing that someone was speaking but unable to identify who it might be. His assistant had left for the evening, and no one else should have access to his direct phone line. As he approached his office door, Marcus could hear a young voice speaking with remarkable composure and intelligence. The voice was asking probing questions about business verification procedures with a sophistication that seemed impossible for someone so young. Mr. Crawford, Sophia continued, before we proceed, I need to understand why this transaction requires such unusual urgency. In my experience, legitimate business mergers involve extensive due diligence periods, legal reviews, and board approvals. Could you explain why this particular deal bypasses standard corporate protocols? Crawford's breathing became audibly agitated. Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but you're about to cost Sterling Industries $800 million. The market conditions are perfect right now, but they'll change by tomorrow morning. This is a limited-time opportunity that requires immediate action. Sophia had heard this type of pressure tactic before, not in business contexts, but in the scam prevention seminars her school had conducted. The police officer who visited their class had specifically warned about criminals who created artificial urgency to prevent victims from thinking clearly or seeking advice from others. I understand your concerns about timing, Sophia replied diplomatically, but I'm sure you'll agree that protecting Mr. Sterling's interests requires proper verification. Could you send the merger documents to our secure email system so our legal team can review them before Mr. Sterling signs anything? Our legal team? Crawford's voice rose an octave. I am the legal team. These documents are confidential and can't be transmitted through standard email systems. That's why we need the authorization codes now. Marcus, who had been listening from outside his office door, felt his blood run cold. Authorization codes? No legitimate lawyer would request his personal authorization codes over the phone, especially not for a deal he had never heard of involving a company he didn't recognize. He stepped into his office to find a young girl with an oversized backpack seated behind his desk, holding his phone with the confidence of a seasoned negotiator. For a moment, Marcus was too stunned to speak. This child, who couldn't have been more than 12 or 13 years old, was conducting what appeared to be a sophisticated business conversation with someone claiming to represent his interests. Sophia looked up as Marcus entered, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of relief and concern. She quickly covered the phone's mouthpiece with her hand. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered urgently, "there's a man on the phone claiming to be your lawyer. He says his name is James Crawford, and he's trying to get you to authorize an $800 million merger with a company called Pinnacle Tech Corporation. He's been very aggressive and won't provide proper verification. He wants your electronic signature codes immediately." Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He had never heard of James Crawford, had no business relationship with Pinnacle Tech Corporation, and certainly hadn't authorized any merger discussions. More importantly, his real legal team was Patterson, Williams and Associates, and they would never conduct business in such an unprofessional manner. "Keep him talking," Marcus whispered back, his mind racing as he realized the magnitude of what this child had potentially prevented. "Ask him specific questions about the merger terms." Sophia nodded and returned to the phone conversation with remarkable composure. "Mr. Crawford, Mr. Sterling would like me to review the specific terms of this merger before he provides any authorization. Could you tell me what percentage of Sterling Industries would be acquired by Pinnacle Tech?" "Percentage? It's not an acquisition, it's a partnership, a joint venture. Look, I don't have time to explain every detail to a secretary. Just get Marcus on the phone so we can finalize this." Marcus felt his anger building, not at Sophia, but at the sophisticated scam that was clearly being perpetrated against him. The caller's refusal to provide specific details, his aggressive timeline, and his apparent lack of knowledge about basic merger structures all confirmed what Sophia had already suspected. This was an elaborate fraud attempt. "Mr. Crawford," Sophia continued with remarkable poise, "could you please hold for just one moment? Mr. Sterling has just arrived, and he'd like to review his calendar to confirm he has time for this call." Before Crawford could object, Sophia put the call on hold and looked up at Marcus with eyes that held intelligence far beyond her years. "Mr. Sterling, I don't think this man is really a lawyer," she said quietly. "He doesn't know basic legal procedures, he's trying to rush you into making decisions, and he couldn't answer simple questions about the companies involved. My mom always taught me that honest people don't mind being asked questions." Marcus stared at this extraordinary child who had just saved him from what could have been financial devastation. In that moment, he realized that Sophia, a 12-year-old girl whose mother cleaned his offices, had demonstrated more business acumen and protective instinct than many of his highly paid executives ever had. Marcus Sterling stood frozen in his own office, watching a 12-year-old girl who had just potentially saved his entire empire from collapse. The weight of the situation crashed over him like a tsunami. This child, whose existence he had never acknowledged, despite her mother cleaning his office for years, had demonstrated more loyalty and intelligence in 10 minutes than his entire executive team had shown in months. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she held the phone, the magnitude of what she had stumbled into finally hitting her. She wasn't just answering a random business call anymore. She was standing between a powerful man and people who wanted to steal everything from him. The responsibility felt crushing for someone who still needed permission to stay up past 9 o'clock on school nights. "Mr. Sterling," Sophia whispered, her voice wavering for the first time. "What if I made a mistake? What if he really is your lawyer and I just ruined something important for you?" The vulnerability in her voice cut through Marcus like a blade. Here was a child who had risked everything to protect a stranger, and now she was terrified that her good intentions might have caused harm. In that moment, Marcus saw something he had forgotten existed in his world of corporate ruthlessness, pure, selfless concern for another person's well-being. "Sophia," Marcus said gently, kneeling down to her eye level, "you didn't make a mistake. You may have just saved my company, my employees' jobs, and my entire life's work. That man on the phone is trying to steal from me, and you're the only person who was smart enough and brave enough to stop him." Tears began forming in Sophia's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing she had done the right thing. For years, she had watched her mother work tirelessly for people who treated her as invisible, and now she had finally found a way to prove that her family mattered, that they had value beyond their ability to clean floors and empty trash cans. The phone began ringing again, jarring them both back to the immediate crisis. Crawford wasn't giving up easily, and his persistence only confirmed their suspicions about his criminal intentions. "What do we do now?" Sophia asked, her courage returning as she realized Marcus trusted her judgment. "We're going to catch him," Marcus said, his business instincts kicking in. "But I need you to keep talking to him while I record the conversation and contact the authorities. Can you do that?" Sophia nodded, her fear transforming into determination. She had started this fight accidentally, but she was going to finish it on purpose. Marcus quickly activated his phone's recording system and gestured for Sophia to answer the call. As she picked up the receiver, he marveled at how this child possessed the kind of quick thinking and moral courage that he had rarely encountered in boardrooms filled with Harvard-educated executives. "Mr. Crawford," Sophia said, her voice steady again, "I apologize for the delay. Mr. Sterling is reviewing some documents and would like me to gather a few more details about this merger." "Finally!" Crawford's voice exploded through the speaker, his frustration evident to anyone listening. "I've been waiting for 20 minutes. Do you people have any idea how much money you're wasting with these delays?" Sophia looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. They both knew that Crawford's anger was making him careless, and careless criminals made mistakes that could expose their entire operation. "Mr. Crawford, could you walk me through exactly how Mr. Sterling would provide his electronic signature authorization? What specific information would you need from him?" There was a pause as Crawford seemed to be consulting notes, or perhaps other people. Sophia and Marcus could hear muffled voices in the background, confirming that this was likely an organized criminal operation rather than a solo attempt. "We need his corporate authentication codes, his personal verification PIN, and temporary access to his primary business banking credentials for the fund transfer verification," Crawford replied, his voice taking on the mechanical tone of someone reading from a script. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Those were the exact pieces of information that would give criminals complete access to his company's financial accounts. With that information, they could drain every dollar Sterling Industries had accumulated over decades of hard work. Sophia, despite being only 12 years old, understood enough about online security from her computer classes to know that legitimate businesses never requested such sensitive information over the phone. Her school had taught students about internet safety and phone scams, and Crawford was checking every box on the criminal behavior list. "Mr. Crawford," Sophia said, her voice taking on a subtle authority that amazed Marcus. "I'm concerned about providing such sensitive information over an unsecured phone line. Shouldn't this type of transaction go through your firm's secure digital portal?" "Secure portal?" Crawford's voice cracked slightly. The portal is down for maintenance. That's why we need to handle this manually." "Look, kid, I don't know what your job is there, but you're about to cost everyone a fortune if you don't stop asking stupid questions." The insult hit Sophia like a physical blow. Throughout her young life, she had been dismissed, ignored, and talked down to because of her age, her family's economic status, and her position in a world that valued wealth over wisdom. But this time was different. This time, she held all the power, and Crawford didn't even know it. "Sir," Sophia replied, with a dignity that would have made her mother proud, "I'm just trying to protect Mr. Sterling's interests. Surely you can understand the importance of security protocols when dealing with such large amounts of money." Marcus watched in amazement as this child turned the conversation into a masterclass in criminal detection. Sophia wasn't just stalling anymore. She was actively gathering evidence that would help authorities identify and prosecute the entire operation. Security protocols. Crawford laughed harshly. Let me explain something to you, little girl. In the real world of high-stakes business, opportunities don't wait for bureaucratic nonsense. Sterling Industries is about to miss the biggest deal in its history because some secretary is playing security guard. The condescension in Crawford's voice triggered something fierce in Sophia. She had watched her mother endure years of disrespect from people who thought their money made them better than hard-working families like hers. She had seen Elena smile politely while executives treated her like furniture, and she had promised herself that someday, somehow, she would prove that her family deserved better. "Mr. Crawford," Sophia said, her voice carrying a steely determination that surprised everyone, including herself. "Before we proceed with any authorization codes, I need you to answer one simple question." "What question?" Crawford snapped, clearly losing patience with what he perceived as a child's game. "If this merger is so legitimate and urgent, why haven't any of Mr. Sterling's actual lawyers from Patterson, Williams and Associates been involved in the negotiations?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized that Sophia had just delivered the knockout blow. She had somehow remembered the name of his real law firm from documents she had seen while helping her mother clean his office, and she had used that knowledge to expose Crawford's entire fabrication. "Patterson? Who?" Crawford stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Patterson, Williams and Associates," Sophia repeated calmly. "Mr. Sterling's primary legal counsel. They handle all his major business transactions. I'm surprised they haven't been coordinating with your firm on such an important merger." Marcus could hear panicked whispers in the background as Crawford apparently consulted with his accomplices. The criminal operation was falling apart in real time, dismantled by a 12-year-old girl who had simply paid attention to details that adults had assumed she wouldn't understand. "Look, this is taking too long," Crawford finally said, his professional facade completely abandoned. "Just give me the authorization codes now, or Sterling Industries will regret missing this opportunity forever." The threat was the final piece of evidence they needed. Marcus stepped forward and took the phone from Sophia's hands. "This is Marcus Sterling," he said, his voice cold with controlled fury. "And you, Mr. Crawford, just attempted to commit fraud against my company while threatening a child. The authorities are already on their way to trace this call, and every word of this conversation has been recorded." The line went dead immediately. Sophia looked up at Marcus, her eyes wide with the realization that they had actually done it. They had stopped the criminals and protected Sterling Industries from devastating financial theft. "We did it," she whispered, hardly believing it herself. "No," Marcus corrected gently. "You did it. You saved everything." In the aftermath of the thwarted scam, Marcus Sterling's office fell into a silence that seemed to vibrate with unspoken emotions. Sophia sat in the massive executive chair, her small frame dwarfed by the leather and mahogany that surrounded her, while Marcus paced behind his desk, the reality of what had just transpired slowly sinking in. The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway broke their contemplative moment. Elena Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, her face pale with worry and confusion. She had heard voices coming from the executive office and feared the worst, that her daughter had somehow gotten into trouble that could cost them both everything. "Sophia, what are you doing in here?" Elena's voice carried the particular mix of panic and protective anger that only mothers possess. Her eyes darted between her daughter and Marcus, trying to understand how her 12-year-old had ended up behind the CEO's desk while she was supposed to be quietly doing homework. "Mama, I can explain," Sophia began, but Marcus stepped forward, holding up his hand gently. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, his voice carrying a respect that Elena had never heard directed toward her in 8 years of working in this building. "Your daughter just saved my company from losing hundreds of millions of dollars." Elena's expression shifted from worry to bewilderment. She looked at Sophia, then back at Marcus, struggling to process what she was hearing. In her world, powerful executives didn't speak to cleaning staff with such genuine appreciation. And 12-year-old girls certainly didn't save multinational corporations from financial disaster. "I don't understand," Elena whispered, her hands unconsciously gripping her cleaning supplies tighter, as if holding on to something familiar could help her navigate this surreal situation. Sophia climbed down from the chair and rushed to her mother's side, her earlier courage temporarily replaced by the need for maternal comfort. "Mama, there were bad people trying to steal money from Mr. Sterling's company. I accidentally answered his phone, and they tried to trick me into giving them secret codes that would let them take everything." But Sophia recognized it was a scam, Marcus added, his voice filled with admiration that was completely foreign to Elena's experience with corporate executives. She asked exactly the right questions, stayed calm under pressure, and ultimately exposed their entire operation. "The police are already tracking the call, and we have enough evidence to prosecute them." Elena felt the world tilting beneath her feet. For years, she had worked in this building feeling invisible, insignificant, existing only to maintain the pristine environment that important people needed to conduct their important business. The idea that her daughter, her brilliant, curious, wonderful daughter, had somehow become central to that world of importance was almost impossible to comprehend. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus continued, "I need you to understand something. I've been running this company for over 2 decades, and I've worked with some of the most educated, experienced business professionals in the world. None of them would have handled this situation with the intelligence and composure that Sophia demonstrated tonight." Tears began forming in Elena's eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound mixture of pride and disbelief. She had always known Sophia was special, had always seen the exceptional intelligence behind her daughter's quiet observations and thoughtful questions. But having that intelligence recognized and praised by someone of Marcus Sterling's stature felt like validation of everything she had hoped for her child's future. "Sophia," Eleanor said softly, kneeling down to her daughter's level, "tell me exactly what happened." As Sophia recounted the evening's events, Elena watched her daughter's face transform. The quiet, obedient child who had learned to make herself invisible in adult spaces was replaced by a confident young person who had discovered her own voice and her own power. Sophia spoke with clarity and precision about business concepts that Elena herself didn't fully understand, demonstrating a natural aptitude for strategic thinking that seemed impossible in someone so young. "The man kept trying to rush Mr. Sterling into making decisions without proper verification," Sophia explained. "He wouldn't answer basic questions about his law firm, and he got angry when I asked for documentation. In my computer class, they taught us that real businesses always have ways to verify their identity." Marcus found himself marveling, not just at Sophia's intelligence, but at the quality of her education and her natural ethical compass. This child had received better practical training in fraud prevention from her public school than many of his executives had gotten from their expensive university programs. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, turning back to Elena, "I owe you both an enormous debt of gratitude, but more than that, I owe you an apology." Eleanor looked up, startled. In 8 years of employment, no executive had ever apologized to her for anything. "I've worked in this building for over 20 years, Marcus continued, "and I've made it my practice to ignore the people who keep it running. I've treated you and your colleagues as if you were invisible, as if your lives and your families didn't matter. That was wrong, and I'm sorry." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Elena felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the defensive wall she had built around her dignity to protect herself from years of casual dismissal. "Mr. Sterling," Elena said carefully, "we don't expect—" "You should expect it," Marcus interrupted gently. "You should expect to be treated with respect and recognition. You should expect your contributions to be valued, and your daughter—" He looked at Sophia with something approaching awe. "Your daughter should expect the world to make room for her extraordinary talents. Sophia felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the heated office air. For the first time in her life, an adult outside her family was seeing her not as a child to be managed or ignored, but as a person whose thoughts and abilities had real value. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, her natural curiosity already moving beyond the evening's drama to consider the larger implications. Marcus paused, realizing that this question carried more weight than a simple inquiry about next steps. This child had just demonstrated capabilities that could change her entire trajectory in life, and his response might determine whether those capabilities would be nurtured or squandered. "Now," Marcus said thoughtfully, "we make sure this never happens again. We strengthen our security protocols, we work with law enforcement to track down these criminals, and we make sure our employees are trained to recognize similar threats. But more importantly," he continued, looking directly at Sophia, "we make sure that exceptional young minds like yours have every opportunity to develop and contribute. You've shown me something tonight that I had forgotten, that intelligence and integrity aren't determined by age, education, or economic background. They're determined by character." Elena felt tears flowing freely now, overwhelmed by the recognition her daughter was receiving, and the possibilities it might represent. She had spent years sacrificing her own dreams to ensure Sophia had educational opportunities, working multiple jobs to pay for school supplies and library fines, driving herself to exhaustion to give her children chances she had never had. "Mr. Sterling," Elena said, her voice trembling with emotion, "Sophia has always been extraordinary. She reads everything she can find, asks questions about everything she sees, and remembers details that adults miss. But no one has ever told her that those qualities could actually matter in the real world." Marcus felt a profound shame wash over him as he realized the implications of Elena's words. How many brilliant minds had he overlooked simply because they existed in circumstances he had deemed irrelevant? How many opportunities for innovation and problem-solving had he missed because he had limited his attention to people who looked and sounded like his existing leadership team? "They matter enormously," Marcus said firmly. "And I want to make sure Sophia understands that her mind, her questions, her observations are not just valuable. They're essential. The world needs people who can see what others miss, who can ask the right questions, who can stay calm when everyone else is panicking." Sophia looked up at this powerful man who was speaking to her as if she were a colleague rather than a child, and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of what might be possible for her future. She had always loved learning, had always been curious about how things worked and why people made the decisions they made. But she had never imagined that these interests could translate into real influence in the adult world. Could I maybe learn more about how businesses work?" Sophia asked hesitantly. "Not just from books, but from seeing how real decisions get made." Marcus smiled, recognizing in that question the spark of ambition that could change everything for this remarkable young person. "Sophia," he said, "I think that's exactly what should happen next." The following morning brought an energy to Sterling Industries that no one could have anticipated. Word of the previous night's incident had somehow spread through the building's invisible network of whispered conversations and knowing glances that characterized any large organization. Employees who had never spoken directly to Elena Rodriguez suddenly found reasons to walk past her workstation, offering subtle nods of respect and curious glances. Sophia arrived at the building after school, her backpack heavier than usual with textbooks and the weight of everything that had changed overnight. The security guard at the front desk, who had never acknowledged her existence during her previous visits, actually looked up from his newspaper and smiled. "Miss Rodriguez," he said with genuine warmth, "Mr. Sterling asked me to escort you directly to his office when you arrived." The elevator ride to the top floor felt different this time. Instead of feeling like an intruder in a world where she didn't belong, Sophia found herself studying the corporate artwork and polished surfaces with new eyes. She wasn't just a cleaning lady's daughter sneaking through important spaces anymore. She was someone who had proven she belonged in rooms where crucial decisions were made. Marcus was waiting for her in his office, but the space had been transformed since the previous evening. Gone was the intimidating setup designed to establish dominance over visitors. Instead, he had arranged two comfortable chairs near the window, with a small table between them holding documents, notebooks, and what appeared to be educational materials. "Sophia," Marcus said, rising to greet her with the same respect he would show any valued consultant. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night, and I have a proposition for you." Sophia felt her heart racing, unsure whether she was excited or terrified by what he might suggest. Her mother had spent the morning alternating between pride and worry, uncertain whether this newfound attention from such a powerful man would ultimately help or harm their family. "I want to offer you an internship," Marcus continued, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Not a traditional internship, you're far too young for that. But I want to create opportunities for you to learn about business, to observe how companies operate, and to contribute your unique perspective to some of our challenges." Sophia's eyes widened. She had imagined many possibilities after the previous night's drama, but becoming an actual participant in the corporate world had seemed like an impossible dream. "What would that mean exactly?" she asked, her natural caution asserting itself even in the face of such an incredible opportunity. "It would mean spending time here after school and on weekends, learning about different departments, observing meetings, and helping us solve problems that benefit from fresh thinking," Marcus explained. "You demonstrated last night that you can see things that experienced adults miss. That's not a coincidence. That's a valuable skill that we need more of." The door opened quietly, and Elena entered carrying her cleaning supplies, her expression a careful mixture of hope and protective concern. She had spent a sleepless night wondering whether this opportunity was real or whether her daughter was being set up for disappointment. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, standing again, "I wanted to discuss this proposal with you as well. Sophia's participation would be completely voluntary, and it would never interfere with her education or your family time. But I believe she has the potential to benefit enormously from exposure to the business world, and frankly, we would benefit from her insights." Elena studied Marcus's face, searching for any sign of condescension or hidden agenda. She had learned to be suspicious of powerful people who suddenly showed interest in her family. Too often, such attention came with strings attached or disappeared when it was no longer convenient. "Mr. Sterling," Eleanor said carefully, "Sophia is still a child. She needs time to be 12 years old, to play with friends, to discover who she is outside of adult expectations." Marcus nodded, appreciating Eleanor's protective instincts. "You're absolutely right. This would never replace her childhood or her normal activities. Think of it more like an enrichment program, a few hours per week where she can explore interests that clearly excite her." Sophia looked between the two adults, recognizing that this conversation was about much more than her potential internship. Her mother was negotiating not just for opportunities, but for protection of her daughter's well-being and autonomy. "Could I maybe start with just one afternoon per week?" Sophia suggested, demonstrating the same diplomatic skills that had served her so well during the previous night's crisis. "That way, we could see how it works for everyone before making bigger commitments." Eleanor felt a surge of pride at her daughter's wisdom. Even in the face of an exciting opportunity, Sophia was thinking strategically about managing expectations and maintaining balance. "That sounds perfect," Marcus agreed. "And Mrs. Rodriguez, I want to extend an opportunity to you as well." Elena's eyebrows rose in surprise. In 8 years of working for Sterling Industries, no executive had ever offered her anything beyond her basic employment contract. "I've been thinking about last night," Marcus continued, "and I realized that the security breach that almost cost us everything wasn't just a failure of our technical systems, it was a failure of our human systems. We need people who can spot inconsistencies, who pay attention to details that others miss, who can ask the right questions under pressure." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "I'd like to offer you a position in our corporate security department. You would be responsible for training employees to recognize social engineering attacks, developing protocols for verifying identity and sensitive communications, and helping us build a culture where everyone feels empowered to question suspicious activity." Elena felt the room spinning around her. She had spent her entire adult life cleaning other people's messes, maintaining other people's environments, supporting other people's success from the shadows. The idea that her own skills and insights might be valued in a professional capacity seemed almost fantastical. "I don't have any formal security training," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have something better," Marcus replied. "You have the instincts of someone who has spent years observing human behavior, and you raised a daughter who demonstrated perfect judgment under extreme pressure. Those aren't skills that can be taught in a classroom. They're qualities that develop through experience and character." Sophia watched her mother's face transform as she processed this unexpected recognition. For years, Sophia had seen Elena's quiet strength, her ability to read people and situations with uncanny accuracy, her skill at navigating complex social dynamics while maintaining her dignity. Finally, someone else was recognizing what Sophia had always known, that her mother possessed remarkable capabilities that had simply never been given appropriate outlets. Could I think about it?" Elena asked, overwhelmed by the magnitude of change being offered to her family. "Of course," Marcus said. "Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that this isn't charity or some kind of gesture. Our company was almost destroyed last night because we had blind spots in our security awareness. Sophia identified and prevented a sophisticated attack that could have ruined us. That tells me that your family has insights and abilities that we desperately need." The three of them sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each processing the surreal turn their lives had taken in the span of 24 hours. "Mr. Sterling," Sophia said thoughtfully, "if I do this internship, could I maybe help other kids learn about business too? I know lots of smart people at my school who never get chances to see how companies work." Marcus felt something shift in his chest as he realized that Sophia's first instinct wasn't to hoard her newfound opportunities, but to share them with others who might benefit. This 12-year-old was already demonstrating leadership qualities that many of his senior executives had never developed. "Sophia, that's exactly the kind of thinking that makes you so valuable," Marcus said. "Yes, we could definitely explore ways to create opportunities for other young people. In fact, that could be one of your first projects, helping us develop a youth mentorship program." Elena watched her daughter's face light up with excitement and felt tears forming in her eyes. For years, she had worked multiple jobs and sacrificed personal comforts to ensure Sophia had access to books, educational programs, and opportunities to develop her interests. Seeing that investment validated and expanded in such an unexpected way felt like witnessing a miracle. "There's one more thing," Marcus added, his tone becoming more serious. "The investigation into last night's attempted fraud is ongoing, and there's a possibility that Sophia might need to provide testimony to law enforcement. Are you both comfortable with that?" Sophia straightened in her chair, her expression becoming determined. "If it helps catch the people who tried to steal from you and prevents them from hurting other companies, then yes, I want to help." Eleanor felt another wave of pride wash over her. Her daughter wasn't just intelligent. She had developed a strong moral compass that compelled her to act in service of justice and protection of others. "Then we have a partnership," Marcus said, standing and extending his hand to Sophia. "Welcome to Sterling Industries, Sophia Rodriguez. I have a feeling you're going to change how we think about everything." As Sophia shook his hand, she felt the weight of possibility settling around her like a comfortable blanket. She was still 12 years old, still a student at an underfunded public school, still the daughter of a woman who cleaned offices for a living. But she was also something new, a young person whose voice had been heard, whose abilities had been recognized, whose future had suddenly expanded beyond anything she had previously imagined possible. The boardroom on the 40th floor of Sterling Industries had never witnessed anything like what was about to unfold. Marcus Sterling sat at the head of the polished conference table, surrounded by his senior executive team, men and women who had built their careers on predictability, hierarchy, and the unspoken understanding that power flowed in only one direction. Victoria Blackwood, the chief financial officer, slammed a folder down on the table with enough force to make everyone jump. Her face was flushed with barely contained fury, and her voice carried the sharp edge of someone who felt their authority had been fundamentally threatened. "Marcus, we need to discuss this situation before it destroys everything we've worked to build," Victoria declared, her words cutting through the room's expensive silence like a blade. "You cannot seriously be considering giving executive-level access to a child whose mother cleans our toilets." The brutality of her statement hung in the air, each word carefully chosen to establish the hierarchy that Victoria felt was being dangerously challenged. Round the table, other executives shifted uncomfortably, their expressions revealing the complex mixture of agreement and unease that Victoria's bluntness had triggered. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but before he could respond, Thomas Reynolds, the chief technology officer, leaned forward with the confidence of someone who believed he was stating obvious facts. "Victoria's right, Marcus. This is emotional decision-making, not business strategy. Yes, the girl happened to prevent a security breach, but that doesn't qualify her to participate in corporate operations. We have protocols, procedures, and professional standards for a reason." "Professional standards," Marcus repeated slowly, his voice carrying a dangerous quiet that made several executives glance nervously at each other. "Tell me, Thomas, what professional standards prevented our supposedly sophisticated security systems from detecting an obvious fraud attempt that a 12-year-old recognized immediately?" The question landed like a physical blow, and Thomas's confident expression cracked slightly, but Victoria wasn't finished with her assault on what she clearly viewed as Marcus's temporary insanity. "Marcus, I've known you for 15 years, and I've never seen you make such an irrational decision," Victoria continued, her voice taking on the patronizing tone reserved for interventions. "You're talking about disrupting our entire corporate culture because you feel guilty about how we treat the help. But guilt is not a business strategy." The phrase, "the help," hit Marcus like a slap, forcing him to confront the ugly reality of how his leadership team truly viewed people like Elena and Sophia. These were individuals who earned 7-figure salaries, who lived in mansions and sent their children to elite private schools, dismissing the humanity of people who worked just as hard for a fraction of the compensation. "Let me make sure I understand your position," Marcus said, his voice steady, but his eyes blazing with controlled anger. "Sophia Rodriguez identified and prevented a fraud that could have cost this company hundreds of millions of dollars. She demonstrated better crisis management skills than any of you have shown in similar situations. But you believe she's unqualified to contribute here because of her age and her mother's job title." "Exactly," said Richard Hartwell, the chief operating officer, apparently missing the sarcasm in Marcus's tone. "Marcus, we can't run a Fortune 500 company based on feel-good stories. The board of directors will think you've lost your mind if you start bringing children into strategic discussions." Marcus stood slowly, his movement commanding immediate attention from everyone in the room. The executives who had been leaning back in their chairs straightened, suddenly aware that this conversation had shifted into dangerous territory. "The board of directors," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more authority than any shout. "We'll be very interested to learn that our senior leadership team was so focused on maintaining social hierarchies that they completely missed a sophisticated criminal operation targeting our company. The threat was unmistakable, and the color drained from several faces around the table. These executives had built their careers on their supposed expertise in risk management and strategic thinking, and Marcus was making it clear that their fundamental incompetence had been exposed by someone they considered beneath their notice. Victoria, however, wasn't ready to concede defeat. She had spent too many years clawing her way to the top of the corporate ladder to be challenged by what she viewed as Marcus's temporary emotional breakdown. "Marcus, if you insist on this ridiculous experiment, you'll force us to take this issue to the board ourselves," Victoria said, her voice carrying the unmistakable tone of an ultimatum. "We have a fiduciary responsibility to protect this company from poor leadership decisions, even when those decisions come from the CEO." The room fell into absolute silence. Victoria had just threatened a corporate coup, suggesting that the executive team would move against Marcus if he didn't abandon his plans for Sophia and Eleanor. It was a declaration of war disguised as corporate responsibility. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Sophia Rodriguez sat in the company's small employee break room, trying to focus on her algebra homework while fighting off waves of anxiety that threatened to overwhelm her. The excited energy she had felt about her new opportunities was rapidly being replaced by a growing dread that she had somehow ruined everything for her family. Elena worked quietly nearby, but Sophia could see the tension in her mother's movements, the way her hands gripped her cleaning supplies just a little too tightly, the forced cheerfulness in her voice when other employees offered congratulations. Sophia had developed a keen ability to read her mother's emotional state, and she knew that Elena was terrified. "Mama," Sophia said quietly, closing her textbook, "maybe I should tell Mr. Sterling that I don't want to do the internship anymore." Eleanor stopped her work and looked at her daughter with an expression that mixed love, pride, and deep concern. She had spent the day listening to whispered conversations among the cleaning staff, picking up fragments of gossip about executive meetings and heated discussions. The building's informal communication network had made it clear that Sophia's new status was causing significant controversy among the company's leadership. "Sophia, baby, why would you say that?" Eleanor asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Because people are upset," Sophia replied, her voice small and vulnerable in a way that broke Elena's heart. "I can see it in how they look at us now. Some of the executives are angry, and I don't want you to lose your job because of me." Eleanor felt tears threatening as she realized that her brilliant, compassionate daughter was prepared to sacrifice her own extraordinary opportunities to protect their family's basic security. It was exactly the kind of selfless thinking that made Sophia special, but it also highlighted the impossible position they found themselves in. "Listen to me, mija," Eleanor said, sitting down next to Sophia and taking her hands. "You didn't do anything wrong. You helped someone when they needed help, and you used your mind to protect people from bad things. If other people are upset about that, the problem is with them, not with you." But even as Elena spoke the words, she felt the weight of their precarious situation pressing down on her. She had worked in corporate environments long enough to understand how power functioned, how quickly opportunities could disappear when they threatened established hierarchies. The possibility that Sophia's moment of heroism could ultimately destroy their family's stability was very real. Back in the boardroom, Marcus Sterling was facing the most significant challenge to his authority that he had encountered in decades of business leadership. The executives around the table weren't just questioning his judgment. They were threatening to undermine his position as CEO if he didn't conform to their expectations. "Let me be absolutely clear about something," Marcus said, his voice carrying the steel of someone who had built an empire and wasn't about to see it destroyed by small-minded prejudice. Sofia Rodriguez prevented a catastrophic security breach that none of our highly paid, extensively educated executives even detected. If you believe that her age and background disqualify her from contributing to this company, then you're admitting that our hiring and promotion practices are fundamentally flawed. That's not the point, Victoria snapped, her professional composure finally cracking completely. The point is that running a company isn't a charity project. We have shareholders, board members, and industry reputation to consider. We cannot afford to look like we're making decisions based on emotional impulses rather than business logic. Emotional impulses, Marcus repeated, and several executives flinched at the dangerous quiet in his voice. Victoria, would you like to explain to our shareholders how their investment was almost completely wiped out because our security protocols were inadequate and our executive team was too arrogant to recognize threats that a child could identify? The question hung in the air like a sword, and Victoria realized that Marcus had turned her own argument against her. She had positioned herself as the defender of shareholder interests, but Marcus was making it clear that the shareholders' interests had been protected by Sofia, not by the executive team. Furthermore, Marcus continued, his voice gathering momentum, if any of you attempt to go to the board with complaints about my leadership decisions, I'll make sure they understand exactly how this situation unfolded. I'll make sure they know that while you were all focused on protecting your comfortable assumptions about who belongs in corporate leadership, a 12-year-old girl was actually doing the job you're paid to do. Thomas Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his chair, finally beginning to understand that Marcus wasn't bluffing. Marcus, we're not trying to undermine you. We're just concerned about the precedent this sets. If we start bringing in unqualified people because they happened to help us once. Unqualified? Marcus interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. Thomas, Sofia demonstrated better analytical thinking, better crisis management, and better ethical judgment in one evening than this entire team has shown in months of meetings. If she's unqualified, what does that say about the rest of you? The brutal honesty of the question forced several executives to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had been outperformed by someone they had automatically assumed was their inferior, and their pride was making it impossible for them to accept that reality. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to reassert control over the situation. Marcus, if you insist on this course of action, we'll have no choice but to protect the company's interests through appropriate channels. The board needs to know when the CEO is making decisions that could damage our corporate reputation. Marcus stood slowly, his expression shifting from anger to something much more dangerous, the cold calculation of someone who had just realized that his supposed allies were actually his enemies. Victoria, Marcus said, his voice carrying the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence, you just made the biggest mistake of your career. If you want a war over whether this company values actual competence or just comfortable prejudices, you're going to get exactly what you asked for. The battle lines had been drawn, and Sofia Rodriguez, a 12-year-old girl who just wanted to learn about business, had unknowingly become the center of a corporate conflict that would determine not just her future, but the soul of Sterling Industries itself. 6 months later, Sofia Rodriguez stood before the largest corporate auditorium in the city, addressing an audience of business leaders, educators, and young people who had gathered for the inaugural Youth Innovation Summit. The nervous 12-year-old who had accidentally answered a phone call had transformed into a confident 13-year-old, whose voice carried the authority of someone who had learned that age was no barrier to making a difference. When I first walked into Sterling Industries, I was just trying to stay invisible while my mom worked, Sofia began, her voice clear and strong. I never imagined that asking simple questions could prevent a crime, or that speaking up could change everything for my family and for other families like ours. In the front row, Elena Rodriguez sat wearing the professional attire of Sterling Industries' new Director of Security Training, her eyes shining with pride as she watched her daughter address the crowd. The transformation in their lives had been extraordinary, but it hadn't come without challenges that had tested their strength and resolve. The battle with the executive team had been fierce and public. Victoria Blackwood and 3 other senior executives had indeed approached the board of directors, attempting to undermine Marcus's leadership by characterizing his decisions as emotionally driven rather than strategically sound. But their plan had backfired spectacularly when the board reviewed the financial impact of Sophia's intervention and the subsequent improvements in company security protocols. The criminal investigation had revealed that Crawford's operation was part of a sophisticated international fraud ring that had successfully stolen millions from other companies. Sophia's testimony had been crucial in securing convictions that protected countless other businesses from similar attacks. The 12-year-old, who had been dismissed as just a child, had become the key witness in one of the largest corporate fraud cases in recent history. "The most important thing I learned," Sophia continued, "is that your background doesn't determine your potential. What matters is whether you're willing to ask questions, stand up for what's right, and use whatever talents you have to help others." Marcus Sterling, now serving as chairman of the newly established Sterling Foundation for Youth Development, watched from the side of the stage with profound satisfaction. The company's transformation under new leadership had been remarkable. Productivity had increased, employee satisfaction had soared, and their innovative approach to inclusive leadership had attracted top talent from around the world. The Youth Innovation Program had become Sophia's greatest achievement, creating opportunities for hundreds of young people from diverse backgrounds to develop their skills and contribute to real business solutions. Companies across the country were now implementing similar programs, recognizing that fresh perspectives and unbiased thinking were invaluable assets in an increasingly complex world. "Today, I'm announcing our next initiative," Sophia said, her voice carrying the excitement of someone who had learned that dreams could become reality. "The Sophia Rodriguez Scholarship Fund will provide full university education for 50 students annually, with one requirement: each recipient must commit to mentoring other young people and creating opportunities for the next generation." The audience erupted in applause, but Sophia wasn't finished. She had saved the most important announcement for last. "This scholarship fund exists because one person chose to see potential instead of prejudice, chose to listen instead of dismiss, chose to elevate instead of diminish," Sophia said, looking directly at Marcus. "But more importantly, it exists because my mother taught me that our circumstances don't define our worth, and that we have a responsibility to use our blessings to bless others." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized that her daughter had just announced a program that would change thousands of lives, funded by the success that had grown from a single moment of courage in answering a phone call. As Sophia concluded her speech, the standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes, but the real victory wasn't in the applause. It was in the knowledge that a chain reaction of positive change had been set in motion by a young person who had refused to accept that her voice didn't matter. Crawford and his associates were serving long prison sentences. Victoria Blackwood had quietly resigned and moved to another company. The Sterling Industries security protocols developed by Elena had become the industry standard, preventing millions in losses across multiple corporations. But perhaps most importantly, Sophia Rodriguez had proven that extraordinary change could begin with ordinary courage. The courage to ask questions, to stand up for others, and to believe that every person, regardless of age or background, had something valuable to contribute to the world. As the crowd dispersed, Sophia looked out at the faces of young people who now believed their dreams were possible, and she smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had learned that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't money or status. It was the willingness to see and nurture the potential in others. The accidental phone call had become a golden key that unlocked not just one family's future, but the futures of countless young people who would now have chances they never thought possible.